This video might be a little bit on the longer side, so I'll have timestamps very clearly marked so you can go step by step if you think you need to go through the whole process yourself and listen to all my wisdom I will throw into this video, or you can just jump to the place where you are most interested in and watch that. Hello and welcome to one more episode of Give Me the Mic. So on this channel I keep preaching about the no-code revolution. Well, now I'm at a point where I want to expand the tools I use when it comes to no-code. Today is different, and this is what I keep preaching on this channel. So we have things like ChatGPT, which allowed someone like me, a corporate, boring executive, to create programs even with code. So I'm coding through ChatGPT. But the most powerful thing I'd like to cover on this channel is the no-code tools popping up everywhere, giving us power to do so much more with so little knowledge about coding. I'm using things like Zapier, where you create huge automations without a line of code. Even within the Microsoft ecosystem, you have a lot of tools like Power Automate, Power Pages, and so forth. Now, when it comes to developing a SaaS, or even the simplest tool you want to put online, there is where it gets a little bit tricky. So I've created so much automation, I've pushed so much videos around tools I've created, but I was never able to really host them, like really put them out there for people to use them without either taking a piece of code or taking a template of Zapier and putting the whole automation for themselves together. Fundamentally, I was never able to create an online tool that I can offer for people to use. So in the past month or so, I did lots and lots and lots of research about what would be the best stack of no-code tools that, if put together, will allow you to have the most flexibility of building a SaaS or a tool online, regardless if you want to charge money for it or not, having it so close to a tool that you can actually develop by a code, and having in that tool all the blows and whistles that comes with actually giving it to a developer who will build such a tool using code with a back-end, front-end, and everything in the middle. I think I have figured it out. And today, I'm going to start my SaaS journey. And I will create a playlist for this one. So as I go, you can keep watching all of my attempts to build a tool. Now, the perfect setup that I figured out involves 3 tools. I believe those 3 tools, if you master them, all of them, you can build whatever idea that comes to your mind. And today, I'm going to start this journey. So this video will be the first step in building a tool online. And usually the first thing people want to figure out, user control. How do you manage logins? And I'm going to do it through Google Authentication. So I'm going to take it even a notch further. Now, the 3 tools are Webflow, which takes care of the front end. So it's a no-code website building tool. Wized, which is, by the way, owned by the same company that owns Webflow. And it basically can enable the front end covered by Webflow to grasp and pull in and push information to other back-end tools and features and services that you can find online. And finally, for the back-end, Xano. So Xano is a back-end no-code development tool where you can manage databases, you can create your own APIs, functionalities, and much more. And one of those things you can build on Xano is the Google Authentication, which I will do today. So today's episode is just my first step in building my own SaaS, which will be building my Google Authentication sign up for my users on my website. Okay, so let's begin with Xano. Let's begin with the back end, where all the magic happens. Now, all the elements are important, obviously, but I think it's more important always to really decide and figure out, and I'm learning this from what ChatGPT is telling me and the amazing people I find on Reddit and sometimes YouTube comments. What I understand is it is a very good idea to always separate where you maintain your database and back-end functionality from everything else you do between the front end and the back end. So keep both separated. So there are platforms like Bubble where you build everything in one place. Even I think Webflow itself, for very limited functionalities, you can do the whole thing on Webflow, the database and everything. And developers with experience always recommend having that kind of separation. The logic makes sense in case something goes away or falls off. You basically distribute your risk. Makes sense. Anyways, I'll just take their word for it. So as a start, we're going to set up our account in Xano. Now, when you set up an account in Xano, you get a free workspace and you can do a lot with that. Now, hopefully you reach a point where you want to scale your SaaS or whatever service you're providing. It's working well and you want to basically enable it with more features or just a wider or bigger bandwidth for the tool. Then you'll have to jump on to the paid tiers of Xano, which are a little bit expensive but worthwhile if you are having especially a SaaS where you make money. But just with the free tier, I think you can do a lot. And I think Xano are really generous with what they're offering when it comes to the free tier that you can get. So let me just give you a quick look at the pricing and then we'll start setting up our account, okay? So this is the pricing I'm talking about. So it starts with the build. This is what we're gonna do and work with now. So you have one workspace, 100,000 records, no-code API builder, rate limited API, live weekly office hours, so basically support. And then you go to the launch, so basically you're getting more workspaces, no record or rate limit and other stuff. And then as you grow bigger and bigger, you see the other tiers. I think this is generous. If you look at that, it is good enough for you to create functionalities, validate and test your idea. So I will sign up with my Google account, confirm and sign up. So first thing you see is this form where you have to basically rate your ability in building backend. I'm definitely a beginner. How would you describe yourself? Sales, marketer, no-code developer. I'll just select that. And then what do you plan on using Xano for? Release a product to market, build an internal tool, build a product for a customer, prototype ideas and other. I'll go for now for prototyping ideas. Say get started, and then we're gonna have to give the workspace a name. I will call mine my SaaS. What front end do you plan on using? Not sure if this will help with the functionalities internally or just a form for them to collect information to know what most of their users are actually building and integrating with on the front end. So let's look for Webflow. Here we have it. Do you want to import data from another service? No, I'm starting fresh with Xano. Get started. Okay, so this is what we're getting now. Your database and API. So here it will ask you for at least the initial databases you think you will need to create. For my idea that I have for the tool I will try to build is a user base. This is, I think, default. Everyone will have it, unless you want to have a tool where you don't require anyone to log in. And then what I call a CV run, because my idea will be something around helping people modify their CVs to get or land the job that they're looking for, hopefully. Okay, so we'll say continue here. What features will your app support? Communications, let's see the options. I don't think I'm going to use any of them. I will probably use a Stripe. So if I want to make it SaaS, I will actually have to integrate it with a Stripe API to get payments. So I will select at least Stripe checkout. And then security, I don't think I'm going to need it. So we'll hit continue. Yeah, here is the interesting part, at least for my first step on my website. The user database. Here's asking you basically, how will your users log in? So definitely I'm going to give them the option to log in with a login username and password, basically an email and password. And then when it comes to services like third-party authentication services for my users to easily and without any headache just sign up and log in, I will actually select Google, which is standard, a favorite, and then LinkedIn, because my app has to do with CVs. So people usually expect LinkedIn to be there. So this is simply what we've selected in options, and we can just hit create workspace. Okay, so now the workspace is created and is ready. Now, just for your information, my level in using all the three tools, Wized, Webflow, and Xano, is a beginner level. I believe of building experience by actually doing. And then there are lots of good content online by people like me who did something in front of people and it worked out, and by these platforms themselves. But one of the most powerful things, I know we all know about it, but it's good to remind you that it is out there, is using ChatGPT and GPTs. Now, these are specific tools. So you can either build your own GPT around a tool of those. I did this for Xano, for example, and it was super powerful, especially when I created my first API on Xano. And you can do the same for the other tools. But before you do that and you go start building your own GPTs, search the GPT store. You might be shocked. You might find someone already built that tool for you and it's out there for free. So use that GPT and start working with it. So let's examine the dashboard that we have here. So you have the general dashboard, which shows you the workspace usage. Some statistics probably will come here as you start using the backend. There's a tab for database. So you can see already there's a standard user database, there's a session, there's a CV run, which is a empty basically database I said I'm going to create or I'm going to need. Then you have the APIs, and here it's very important to notice that because we selected certain things that we believe we're going to use, we have the default API created by Xano, which is usually around users and user creation, sign up, login, using passwords. So this is something I'm going to use. I'm going to build into my app later on. I'm going to start with Google this time, but later on I'll make a video on how to build up your database and build up your backend and front end for your users to log in using their email and password. You have the LinkedIn authentication, and then you have the Stripe checkout. All these APIs are now by default in your workspace, so you can use them. Now there is tasks and then a library. I'll not go to every one of them. There's a marketplace where even if you didn't click on one of those, you can simply go to the marketplace and download that API configuration and later on reconfigure yourself. And then here you can connect with other tools like directly with Webflow, I guess, and so forth. So let's go for the Google Authentication API here. This is the API, and you can see here, we can see the endpoints already. So you have the continue, the init, the login, and the sign up. And there's a description which is very nice for each of those endpoints. Now, if you click at the endpoint, it will take you to the logic stack of that endpoint, so you can see how basically it works. But we are not so concerned with that because it's built for us by Xano. That's the power of Xano. Okay, now let me show you the marketplace and show you the ones that we've purchased. So we didn't purchase them. They were selected as we set up the account, and we can see the Google Auth here. Now, as it opens, you can see here, we need to configure it. And again, remember, we are creating an application. Even for authenticating a member to go into your website or your SaaS through Google, it's a client. As far as Google are concerned, this is a client and you need to set up that client. And you do that through the Google console. Okay, I moved myself to the other side because I figured out probably I covered most of the menu on Xano when I was talking, but you can open that, you'll figure it out for yourself. I think, descriptive enough. Okay, so this is the Google console. So this is what you get when you open it. You can see I have already an application created. I want to create a new project, and here you call the project. For location, no organization. I think once you push your first project, you're going to go through a vetting process probably to register it. Then all that information will be here. So I'll hit create. So the project now is being created. It's created. So I'll just select it from the drop down here, and I'll go to my project, and it's selected. For you, if it's your first project, it will be automatically the one selected here. Now, first thing we'll have to go to is API and services. And then we're gonna go to the Auth consent screen. This is when you start or try to log in to a website through your Google account. This is what you get. It's called the Auth consent screen. So that's what we wanna set up for our client. So here we'll have to go through certain steps to get the credentials that we need to take this to the next step. And the first question is the user type. Is it something internal? Are you building a tool for your users within your company or organization? So you just need them to authenticate and log in to your own tool. It will not be something public. Ours actually will be external. Do not worry. We will have the ability to decide on a test user, which will be you probably, and we'll take it from there. Hit create. Now we'll have to give it a name. This is the name of the app that will be asking for consent. I will call it the CV Master. You can change this later on from the Google console when you are actually at the stage where you want to decide the real name of the app and the logo and all these kind of things. But for now, I'll just give it a name. So the name I gave it, the CV Master. Okay. User support email. For now, the email I have in my drop-down is the same email associated with my Google account. So logo, I don't have a logo. App domain, not yet. Now, authorized domain. This is basically the domain where your authorization or your OAuth usage for the client will be placed. You don't need to put the specific subdomain, you just need to put the domain. For our case, we're building this on Webflow. So I added my domain, which is webflow.io. If you're building on Webflow, you'll always get a Webflow-based URL until you decide to actually assign your own and buy your own URL and services. And lastly, you need to set up a developer contact information. And in this case, I am the developer. So again, I'll put my email here. And then we hit save and continue at the bottom. Here, basically, you select the scopes. If you're not aware what a scope is basically a categorization of the APIs that you use from Google. So some of these APIs or endpoints where you can get information or push information, some of them are categorized as non-sensitive, sensitive, and restricted. So for us, for our case, the authentication API, we don't need to actually list it here. So you can just again hit save and continue. Test users. So here you actually list yourself as the test user, so you can actually use that client and get some information out of it to go back to Xano and list it there. So I will add users. So again, I added the same account I'm using to build this API as the test user account. And then you hit save and continue. This is just a summary. And then you reach the summary page, and that means you are done. So we hit go back to the dashboard. So we're at the dashboard and everything is ready. And now as we're done with the OAuth consent screen, we'll go to credentials, and here we can add credentials. This is what we need to do. So now we need to create basically our keys for this client to use at the back end, to tell that back end, this is the client, I own the keys for that client, and I want to use it to authenticate users to go into that client, or to pull information out of those users' account that I will use to create that login for them. So we'll click create credentials, and you have multiple options. We want an authentication client ID. That's what we want. This is what we'll take back to Xano. So here we will select a web application. This is what I'm trying to achieve here. I will keep the name unchanged. And then this is the important part. Here we need to include something called the authorized redirect URI. Remember, when you do these kind of authentications through Google, you click on that button, you get that Google screen, you click your account, you authenticate, and then you go to some other page on that website. It could be back to the home page where you're logged in, or it could be your members account page. So we have to put that link in here, and this is very important for the client to work. So I'll get my link from my Webflow website, and I'll put it here, and later on you'll see things on Webflow, so do not get concerned with that. Just know that you need a URL where you need people to be automatically redirected to after they do the authentication on Google on your website. So you'll just create add URI, and then you paste your URL into this section here, and you're good to go with creating your credential for your app. You hit create, and then you will get the OAuth client created. Now, these are very important, very sensitive credentials, the client ID and the client secret. Remember, those are the keys for your app. So always keep them secret, keep them secure. Do not expose them, do not share them with anyone who doesn't need to have them. Now, if you remember, in Xano, we had to configure the Google endpoints or the Google API in general in Xano so we can use it later on. And this is what we need. So let's, at least for now, copy the client ID. And let's go again to Xano, hit configure. And there's two things we need to insert for configuring the Google authentication. The Google OAuth client ID, which we just copied. We paste it here. And then we go back to the API page. We copy the client secret. We go back to Xano. We paste it here. So we have the client ID and we have the client secret ready. And we hit update, and now it is configured. So based on this, we can start using Xano with our Google authentication to build up our front end authentication for our users. So the back end for now is good enough. Still, I will keep Xano open because we will go back to Xano to get some information as we start configuring things in Wized, connecting front end to back end. Now I want to go to Webflow. Now this is Webflow. Again, I'm a noob when it comes to Webflow and the other tools, maybe a little bit better on Xano, but basically it's a no-code building tool. For myself, I bought a ready-made template. There are free templates you can use. I want to test it, but I want to have something that is really nice because I'm a little bit serious about testing this SaaS idea for me. So do not buy a template. just have one of the free ones. Everything else will work smoothly. It is worthwhile to mention that from this stage on, for us to use the features that we need to use when it comes to Wized working with Webflow, you would need the basic paid account on Webflow. They're the same company. So for you to use Wized with Webflow, Wized will require you to basically insert some code into Webflow. And to have that feature in Webflow, you'll have to have on the minimum paid account. I did that. For me, it's worthwhile for the learning and potential of building something. Okay, so now let me go to the page of the user sign up. So this is the user sign up page. One thing I learned while playing around with this before I did the video is that Wized as an app connecting Xano to Webflow needs a way to read those buttons and elements that you find on the screen here. We'll have to do it manually. It's nothing complex. I'll show you now. So for us in reality, we need just for Wized to read one thing, the button that we click to do the authentication. Everything else will happen automatically. So we need just to identify that button or define that button for Wized, and we'll do it here now before we go to Wized. Now I added the original sign up form, didn't have this second button. I created this button just for this video, and the first thing I would rename it, I would call it Google, and maybe later on I'll just put the Google logo to make it look like those typical sign up or login buttons that we find on websites. First thing, let's change the name. So I called it Google sign up. And by the way, if any of you know good videos on YouTube that I can watch and learn Webflow, put a comment in the comment section below. And as we said, we need to do something here to enable Wiz to read this button and be able to capture it as an element. So here on the top, we select settings and you go down, you'll find something called custom attributes. So we want to add a custom attribute. We click plus button and there's a name and a value. The name is always Wized and the value is, again, you need to put a value that will be easily remembered for you. And most importantly, not mixed up with other elements that you're going to tag from Webflow to Wized later on. So for this one, I will just call it Google Auth button. And now it's ready. So you can see now it transforms into an equation Wized equal between quotations Google Auth button. So now we are good to go and move to Wized. This is what brings the front end and the back end together. This is, you can call it your communication channel. So it will pull things from the front end, push them to the back end. Things will run in the back end, pull them from the back end again and push them to the front end. This is, you can call it the heart of the application. Yes, there are functionalities running on the back end, but this is basically the messenger. This is what takes things back and forth. So on the front end, you have a fully functional tool or system running while the core functionalities are actually happening on the back end, and this is doing all the magic in between. So you'll need to sign up. I will do a login because I already have an account. Okay, and this is the page that you find once you log in. This is basically your workspace. I have already a project that I was playing with. I'm going to create a new project now with you. So we hit create a new project, and this is the page we get. And the first thing you need to give it is the Webflow project link, your project link. So if we go back to Webflow briefly, and we can go here to the home page, this is the link. So you can just copy it, and then we go back to Wized, paste it here. That's the first step. Now, this is where the paid feature comes in. So this is the code that we need to copy into the header of our Webflow website. So both will be linked basically. So we go back to Webflow. So I'll have to exit the designer or the editor, and I'll enter my project here for my settings. And here you find custom code and the header code. This is where I want to paste my code here. So I paste it, I hit save, and then I need to publish just to make sure the published site has that script or that code in its header. So I hit publish here, select domain, which is the same domain we already pasted on Wized, and it's done. So we go back to Wized. So step 1 and step 2 are done. The project name, I'll just call it my CV SaaS, just a name. And then I'm selecting the workspace, which I was just on. I'm ready here. I want to create my project. Let's hit create. I figured out I did something wrong. When I got the URL, I put at the end .com. This is what you get in the editor. Actually, you need to, when you launch it, when you publish it, take the browser-based URL and use it here, which ends with IO. Now see, when I put the correct URL, I got Collab Plus, Webflow, e-commerce, website template. It basically identified my website. I'll hit create project and we get our project on Wized. It looks like the editor, but it's different. But it's very important when you're working on Wized to see your website actually. So let's go to the page where we actually did the work, which is the user sign up. Okay, so on Wized, you will see always this button X-ray. This one basically will expose, like it's hitting an X-ray on the website, and it will expose which element it actually can see as a tool. Wized. If we hit it there, you can see this is what we defined in Webflow. So this element is defined here, so we can use it later on in Wized. Okay, already this is a long video, so let me just go into the important stuff. Let's go set up the API connection with Xano's Google Authentication, create certain actions to get the button clicked, take us to the screen of authentication, authenticate, and then take us to the redirect URL that I've shown you before. So the first thing we do is we go to this panel here, and there are 4 things you have to be aware of that you will use on Wized. You have apps. Basically here you connect Wized to things like Xano, Zapier, and others. You have requests. Here you are making a request to get information or data. You can say basically it's an API request. Here you have actions, and then here you have data store. So things that interact with data. So I don't know how to use all of them. I figured out the part of the authentication. Every episode I do within this playlist around creating my SaaS, I'll try and learn to figure out each of them, how to use it, and together we'll learn. So let's just focus on what we're trying to achieve today, which is a Google authentication. So you'll have to go to the app and define basically 2 apps. I want to define Xano as an app. I don't know if it's necessary, but also I need to define also the Google authentication of Xano. So I told you before, we're going to go back to Xano when we're on Wized. And this is the part. Add app. And here you have the app name. So I'll call it Xano. And then you can select the app. So you can see already they have Firebase and Supabase only as apps defined here. This is Embed 2. Embed 1 had all of them. And clearly now they killed Embed 1. They want to focus on Embed 2 and invest here. So for us, we want a REST API, which is basically the interface where we connect with Xano. So we select that. There's something called the base URL, and no sweat. You go back to your Xano website, you go to the API. So we want to work with this API, right? Click on it. You will find this link here. So let me move myself. I know I've probably obstructed so many things while trying to explain myself today, but we will go and copy this link here. You have it copied. We go back to Wized. This is where, because still not developed, where you need to put little code. I don't even call it code. And here what we need to write always when we insert something into this kind of code schema is return quotations. Automatically you'll get the second one. And then we will paste the link we got from Xano. And that will bring our application into Wized. And for me, not to get confused later on, I renamed the app to Xano Google Auth, because the link we got is for the Google Authentication API. Now later on, we're going to have to create an app for Xano, for Xano's API, default API for users. And we'll cover that later on. But for now, we only need the Xano Google Authentication. So we have it ready. Now, next thing we have to do is go to a request. So we need to make a request. So we'll click on requests here on the left side. Okay, to create our first request, let's go back to Xano. And here you can see all the endpoints you have. Remember, Google has more to offer. You can even add endpoints of your own, but you'll have to go to the Google API documentation and understand those ones, build them here and add them. It is not rocket science. And this tool makes it super easy. But for now, you can see you have one for sign up, one for login and continue, and one called init or initiate. Now you can read a lot about these. There is a description. I will not read it now by Xano provided, but basically you have to start with an init or an initiate when you do the sign up for the first time. So we're gonna copy this endpoint. This is the great thing. You can directly copy it from here. So we'll go back to Wized. We'll hit the plus button to create a request. We'll call it Google_init. No folder to select. You can see already the app we created here. So we select that app. the URL endpoint. So we don't need to put the URL. We just need to put the endpoint here. So we'll only have to put, as we did before, we put return, and between the quotations, we paste the endpoint. Now, because I copied it from Xano, it put the whole link. I don't need it because I already defined the app. I will remove everything and I'll just keep the endpoint as it was on Xano. And just to double check, we'll go back to Xano, and this is what you need to include: / Auth / Google / init. And this is very also important to note that this is a GET request. So we go back to Wized, the method, it's a GET. Now here we have to input something called the URL parameters. So to understand what we need to put here, we go back to Xano. Again, no rocket science here. So we have this endpoint. We have the logic behind it, as I mentioned when I introduced Xano. We click on it, and if you see here, basically it looks for one input. This is the logic. This is the logic stack from inputs to function stack that works here, and then the output that you get. So when it comes to input, it's a text input and it's one. It's called redirect URI. So if you want, just copy it as it is. You can actually copy it from here. And we go back to Wized and we add a parameter. The key for that parameter is redirect URI. So it's the same definition of the input that will go to the API. Now the value here is, if you remember, when we set our on Google or our client on Google, we set an automatic redirect URI. It has to be the same. So we need to bring that same URL and basically paste it here. And we'll have to do it in the same way. Return, space, and then the link. And here it is. So I just put return and I put the redirect URI. So now we have everything to have a proper API call. So we can run it. So we go here to the Google init. This is the request that we've just built, and you can hit run. Then you drop down here to see the results, and you can see it is a success. So we got back some results. We got back some data, which is I think the URI and the actual URI link, and some stats around the API call. It's a success basically. The code is 200 and it's okay, true, good. So now the API call is working. How to get it to work with Webflow is in action. I need to click something to get this process started, right? So again, let's go to the left panel here and we can click on this thunder icon, which is actions, and we'll just add one action. The first action is clicking the button. So I called it Google Authentication Click, no folders, and then I want to click an element. And the attribute, we can see it here because we've defined it properly in Webflow as we've done before. So I click it, and then, okay, I have an action and I have to add the actual action. So I've clicked it. What will happen after I click it? We go to settings. Now I've defined the element I'm talking about, the attribute and the element. So what is the action? So I'll have to go to settings. So the action is an event. What is the event? It is a click. And what's the action that happens when we perform that event? It's a request. Remember, we created that request for the API call that we tested. And this is the request, Google init. So we have everything selected here, and we have built our own first action on this website. Now we need one final step, and this will be up and running. We need to actually add one more action to trigger after the request is made, because clicking the button will run the API and the API will be successful and we'll get some results. Nothing will happen. So we need to add one more action. So now I call this action, it's a successful authentication run. So success auth run. The type is an event. It's an event. It's not an element. So you have, remember, two options. It's an element, either we click or interact with, or an event. This one is an event. What is the trigger for this event? It's basically another action or a request, basically the API call that finishes, right? So we'll have to go and say request finishes. You have it very clearly put here. So we made a request and it's done. What is the request? The Google init. Already we defined it in the requests and we have it here. Now we need an action. When it's done, what will happen? So what I want to make sure, if I did the API call and it's successful, I want to redirect to the URI redirect URL. Remember the URL we put in the request and we put even in Google. We want to redirect to that page once this is successful. So how we do that? The way we do it is there's a condition. I want to make sure it's successful. I don't want my user, if something goes wrong, that they get redirected regardless. So you can see here there's a checkbox. Is it conditional? What is the condition? Well, remember on this part here when we did the test run before, so here we got some statuses, right? So I want to make sure it's successful. So when it was successful, the status came back as 200. Or we can use the status text as well as success. Let's use this one, it's easier. So what we say is we want return. See, we're getting the input directly from Google Init, as we are seeing on this part here. We select this one, and again we put dot. It was status, right? So we have it here. R Google Init status. Again, this is something I Googled and I found out on the GPT that I have for Wized. So to have it basically an equal, you put 3 equals and then you put 200. So already we built the condition. So this is the condition. So the trigger will carry on if this condition is met, where the API that became the trigger for this second action was successful by getting back a value equal to 200. Now, if the condition is met, what is the action that we want? We add an action here. The action is navigate to. We want to go to the URI link, right? We click on the URL and this is the same. You just put return r dot. Remember, in the status here, we got the URL. So we want to make it automatic. So later on, if we change it from Google, it's happening automatically here. So we select Google Init and we select dot. Then we have data, right? Select data and then select dot. And we have authentication URL, which is our URI link. And that is done. We are done. Now we can see it is saved. So it's time to test. So let's go click preview. So this is the website. This is the preview. And it runs like a real website, like the real Webflow website. We click the button. What will happen? This will trigger the API call for the Xano Google Authentication, which will run the API call, which is an event, right? A request, an event. It will come back with a status. If it was successful and there's the status value of 200 there, the condition is met for the next action, which is navigating to the URI, which should take us to the page I've defined before, which is one of the standard home pages for this template. So let's test it together. And remember, you have to use the testing account that you defined in Google Console, Google Sign Up. Magic! We have the authentication screen. I'll go to my testing account. I'll click it, continue, and voila. This is our redirect URL. So we've successfully did a complete authentication process on a website being built on Webflow, leveraging API from Xano and having all that linkage and communication functionality done through Wized. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. And if you want to know how to build a bot that works with ChatGPT and responds to any YouTube comment that you receive on your channel automatically, or you want to learn how to build a fully customized GPT on OpenAI, leveraging Xano to build that API, watch the other video here or here, so you get both videos here. And with that, thank you and goodbye.